Captain John Konrad here. I wanted to give you the 10 reasons why Trump is right. We should consider taking back the Panama Canal. So, what am I talking about here? This weekend, President Trump, in case you missed it, threatens to retake Panama Canal, igniting a firestorm. President-elect Donald Trump took a direct shot at Panama over the weekend, calling out what he described exorbitant tolls and unfair treatment of U.S. interests at the Panama Canal, a critical artery for global trade. Goes on to say here that the Panama Canal was sold for $1 by President Carter. And Trump claims 30,000 people died in the building of it, and it's not a fair exchange. But why is this important? Because the Panama Canal has 6% of global shipping traffic, but 70% of the Panama Canal's traffic either is U.S. imports or exports or moving from the East Coast to West Coast. So it has a significant impact on the U.S. economy. And fees are going up. The Panama extended the size of the Panama Canal. They built a new canal for larger ships 2016. In order to pay for that, they greatly increased shipping rates, and they don't give the United States any discount. We get some priority for moving through our naval ships, but we don't get a discount, and this hits on the U.S. economy. On top of that, there was a major drought in the Panama Canal recently. Excuse me. And ships were congested. They were stuck on either side of the Panama Canal. So what the Panamanians did is they auctioned off fast passes for the Panama Canal, and some of these went for millions of dollars, and they did not give U.S. U.S. flagships first priority over those auctions. Now, they claim it was climate change that caused this drought, but if you go back to the building of the new Panama Canal, there were major cracks in the concrete and problems with that canal design where some of that water could be leaking into the oceans. And now they want to do a major expansion of the Gatun Lake that supplies fresh water into the canal. This is going to be very expensive, and they're going to recoup that money by increasing rates even further. So it has a huge economic impact. But I want to go straight into the top 10 reasons why there's some justification for wanting to take back the Panama Canal. Number 10 is Panama was part of Colombia, and they had 80 attempts in order to secede from Colombia back in the early 1900s, and Colombia rejected this. They did not give the Panamanians full rights. The U.S. stepped in and gave Panama its sovereignty. So the very existence of Panama as a nation is due in large part to the United States stepping into that sovereignty right. So Panama would not exist in the first place without the United States. Number 2, as President Trump exclaimed, there were a significant number of deaths to malaria, to the mosquito, to harsh working conditions. This was a massive engineering project, and one in which the French failed. The French were able to build the Suez Canal and raised a lot of money for the Panamanian Canal, started the digging and failed. It was really American engineering and might and new machinery and persistence through those tens of thousands of deaths that allowed us to build the Panama Canal. But unfortunately, that was sold by Jimmy Carter for $1. Now, does that sound like a fair deal? Of course not. But you have to understand, the Democrats have a long, long history last century in giving away American sovereignty, American rights American power. This is not just Jimmy Carter, who has done this. You have to go back to Wilson, with the creation of the League of Nations, wanting to undermine U.S. sovereignty, give away U.S. rights and laws to international law. That was the first major giveaway. Then you have FDR, gave away the Philippines, the jewels of the Pacific, to the Filipino people. Now, you can say this is a wonderful thing and the Filipinos wanted this, but we had put in elites into the Filipino government. And those elites and some of the, far right and far left forces in the Philippines wanted independence, but not every Filipino wanted independence. They did not give the vote to the Philippine people. Why? The Philippines are very Christian, very Catholic nation, and they're minorities, mostly brown people, people of color. And if you had those millions of people voting, Democrats were afraid they would vote for Republicans. So there was impetus to give it away at the political level. After FDR gave away the Philippines, which Truman executed upon, then the next major giveaway was Truman giving away all our ships, giving away our airplanes, absolutely dismantling the U.S. military might, which really bit us in the rear during the Korean War. That's why we were not able to defeat China. Forget, it was a war against northern Korea, which is backed by China, and then we actually fought Chinese in the Korean War. People think, Chinese, there's this media narrative that the China is peaceful and hasn't been to war in decades. We, the United States, fought and went to a stalemate in a war against China. It was Chinese troops that we were fighting in after MacArthur left the Philippines. And we were unprepared because Truman had dismantled and sold away for scrap the majority of our military equipment and forces. Fast forward, you have Jimmy Carter giving away the Panama Canal for $1, and then Bill Clinton gives away our most important naval and air force base in the Pacific, arguably in the world, Subic Bay in the Philippines and Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, just gives it back to the Philippine people. Did they want us to give away? Did he ask them to vote for it? By that time, there were a lot of tensions and they had felt abandoned by the United States, so there was a lot more public support for ejecting the United States. But that base, Subic Bay, was absolutely critical in our fight in the Vietnam and Korean Wars, and would be absolutely critical in any fight or contest with China. The strategic ability there, the repair and new build facilities in the Philippines, and also the most important strait for China, waterway. People think it's the Taiwan Strait, but more important than the Taiwan Strait is what's on the other side of Taiwan, which is the Luzon Strait, is absolutely critical. The majority of the fighting in World War II in the Pacific, and the Pacific battle was some of the most brutal fighting in the war, was for control of the Luzon Strait between Taiwan and the Philippines, which now China is flooding with illegal fishermen, Coast Guard that are attacking Filipino citizens, Filipino fishermen, China's maritime militia. Now they have warships in Philippines EEZ. So it's the next major giveaway. This is probably the biggest of all giveaways by Democrats, was President Obama, who gave away 370,000 square nautical miles to environmentalists. They just made it absolutely off limits to development, drilling, a large number of fishing, just a huge, enormous 370,000 square nautical miles, which is almost 500,000 square miles, just given away to environmental interests by President Obama. So Jimmy Carter is one of a long line of Democrats who have given away things that we fought for these islands that surround the Pacific Remote Marine National Monument that Obama gave away. We fought for that territory in World War II. He just gives it away. So Jimmy Carter's not the only one. It's a long line. So that's number 8. Number 7, going back to this 6% of world trade and shipping trade and 70% import-exports to the United States. This is a huge figure. And it's not only a figure of an economic cost that gets passed on to U.S. consumers, these Panama rates. And it's not just the high rates now, but again, Panama wants to increase those rates to mitigate what they call is climate change, drought, low water levels, which could also be poor engineering of the new canal by Panama. They are going to vastly increase those rates again, which disproportionately hits the U.S. economy and is paid for by American consumers. So it's an absolutely strategic waterway in terms of the economy and their secondary and tertiary costs. Ships, we built deep water ports, Savannah, we deepened New Jersey, New York. Boston put a lot of money. The East Coast ports put billions of dollars into dredging, making the ports deeper and raising bridges. The huge Bayonne Bridge in New Jersey was raised so that we could take advantage of this new canal. Well, we have not been able to take full advantage because of these port congestion problems. So that means a lot of that cargo has to go into Long Beach, LA, which has suffered from port congestion in recent memory. But then that has to be put on trains and trucks. Well, ships are 1/10 the cost and 1/10 the energy use emissions of trains, which are 1/10 that of trucks. So you're paying additional rates even if your goods are not coming through the Panama Canal, because it's cheaper to put it on trucks and trains. But in reality, it's at least 10 times more expensive. So the economic impact and then the cost to our infrastructure of these heavy goods that are going onto the roads, onto our rails, causing traffic, causing additional congestion, this all adds up significantly. So there's Obama's marine environment. And then, so that's number 7. Number 6 is drugs. Panama has a bad history with drugs. Manuel Noriega we invaded Panama and we arrested Noriega because of drug dealing. They have a long history of helping Colombia, of being a port for these drugs that are potentially coming through. But particularly the fentanyl. So it's a huge drug issue, and they're not doing enough to stop the flow of drugs into Panama and have a history going back to Noriega about it. All right, so drugs is number 6. Number 5 is the Panama Papers. So the Panama Papers was a release on the internet of 1.5 million financial and legal records that exposed enormous crime and corruption. So Panama has become, since the United States left, kind of a free economic zone for shady, illegal deals. And a lot of the shell companies are incorporated or have connections into Panama. Now, this Panama Paper, the initial law firm that created these shell companies, illegal tax evasions, and let's be clear, people evading taxes, a lot of very wealthy people evading taxes using these shell corporations in Panama, is a cost on the U.S. taxpayer because they are not paying American taxes. So it was a huge scandal, and really Panama was found to be the center of a lot of this illicit tax evasion, but also shell companies that were supporting drug deals, that were supporting arms trades, and supporting a lot of other nefarious activity. So that is number 5. Number 4 is we've invaded Panama before. There's precedent for an invasion of Panama. And this is not very long ago. It's within my lifetime. It's in my memory. I remember the invasion of Panama. And we have a short memory in the United States, but it's not that short. We haven't been in that many wars. We invaded Panama. And ostensibly, the George Bush said the reason why we invaded Panama was part of the war on drugs. But you have to remember, prior to that, George Bush was director of the CIA. He was head ambassador at the UN, and he was ambassador to China. He saw what China was doing in Panama, investing loads of money into Panama and helping with these shell corporations. The Panama Papers did not come out then, and there are reasons why the CIA wanted to keep that quiet. But this was a major reason for the war. It wasn't just drugs. It was this illicit activity in this free legal zone in Panama that was supporting drug dealers worldwide, that was supporting tax evaders, that was supporting arms dealers and other bad actors. So that's number 4. There is precedent for this. Number 3 is flags of convenience. So not only did we create the nation of Panama and create the Panama Canal, but we also created the Ship Registry of Panama, which was run by the United States. And this was a flag of convenience. It was set up by the United States. And the reason for it was there were certain activities that precursor to the CIA. This was started before World War II. That the U.S. State Department had interest. They wanted to move some ships under flags of registry that the U.S. controlled. Again, we controlled the Panama Canal zone. That was U.S. territory. It was close U.S. territory around the canal. In fact, Senator John McCain ran for president, and that was a big question. Could he run for president? Because he was not born in the continental United States. He was born in the canal zone of Panama. And that's another important thing. When Trump says he wants to take back the canal, he doesn't want the entire country. He wants the canal zone, where U.S. Southern Command used to be based. So we created these flags of convenience, and then in World War II, they were very important because some neutral countries wanted the protection of the U.S. Navy, but did not want to put a U.S. flag on the back of the ship. So if you run a U.S. flag ship, the U.S. Navy is obligated by law to protect you. But it also, during times of war, gives the enemy can sink, as the German U-boats did, American flag ships. So Panama was used as this flag of convenience in order to provide other nations with the protection of the U.S. Navy, but without tying it to the United States and being in the bullseye of enemy Axis ships. So we created this, and then after we gave back the Panama Canal, Panama goes ahead and takes control of the Panamanian registry from the United States. And they said, it's our registry. Well, we created whose registry it is. We rolled over. This was a major concern for President Bush. He created the Marshall Islands Registry and made it a U.S. corporation. And we had previous to that the Liberian Registry as a U.S. corporation. And in order to compete with Panama, which had taken the registry from the United States. But the problem with this now, and why this is costing Americans a lot of money and causing a lot of security concerns around the world, is this flag of convenience means that anyone around the world can register a ship in Panama. You don't have to be from the United States. You don't have to be from Panama in order to register your ship in Panama. You just pay Panamanian taxes, and those taxes are lower. The safety standards are also lower if you register Panamanian, and there aren't laws like you don't have to put U.S. crew on ships. So Panamanian is the second largest registry in the world, but they also have a history, and they claim to be cleaning up now, but they have a history of registering really shady ships. So we have Russian sanctions, and Russia creates a shadow fleet to bypass sanctions, and Panama got rid of some of the shadow fleet, deregistered it so you cannot move sanctioned oil and Russian oil on ships. But some of the ships they left in the registry, like this one LNG ship in November, registered in Panama. They have also done a lot of registry of Iran shadow fleet. So how is Iran exporting all of this oil to China and Venezuela and other places? They're doing it on Panamanian registered ships. So that's a major problem. But also, the Panama Registry gives them a vote in the International Maritime Organization in London. The IMO in London is the body that creates international law around maritime vessels. And the IMO has not been very friendly to U.S. flagged ships. U.S. flagged interest, U.S. merchant mariners. We had some of the strictest training requirements in the world through the U.S. Coast Guard. And then the IMO comes in and says, you have to do our training. So we have to do Coast Guard training and then IMO redundant training. And this is a large reason why the U.S. has a shortage of merchant mariners, and why the Navy is now laying up 17 ships, because we don't have enough merchant mariners, because we're following this international IMO organization law, which is based out of London. It's a UN organization. But on top of that, Panama has a huge controlling interest, because part of the way you vote is by the number of ships you have registered. And they recently made a vote in order to become Secretary General of the IMO. Let me pull this up. IMO's. So this has historically been a figurehead organization where the head of the IMO is not really in charge of the IMO. The IMO is run by votes of the member nations and these archaic rules. But there was a secretariat, a civilian organization that ran the rules of the IMO. And the last head of that was a 2-star retired Coast Guard admiral. And the Secretary General, the figurehead, was a South Korean businessman, ship owner. And we worked very well together. Well, China wants to take over UN organizations, so they backed the Panama Flag of Convenience, the head delegate who is running this Flag of Convenience that's registering shadow fleet and moving arms shipments around the world and doing other nefarious actors. China backed them. Our own delegate to the IMO, Malte Medina, she was born in Panama. Now she's a U.S. citizen, but she was born in Panama, and she backed this. And the first thing they did, and they will say he was ready to retire and all these other things, but one of the very first actions he did was take control over the IMO, align with Chinese interests, not give any additional support to American flagships, zero additional support, and really and push out, force retire, or make a deal with this 2-star Coast Guard admiral who was running the organization and running it based on long-established international law. So these people are creating laws that U.S. flag ships and all ships that import and export out of the United States are under this IMO. And it's being run by Panama right now, and they are not acting in the United States' interest. They are going head over heels for climate initiatives that are benefiting China and benefiting certain European states. And somehow these IMO rules and regulations are being adopted by the Navy. So the Navy's putting these crazy environmental standards on U.S. ships, including oilers that have to replenish aircraft carriers, the refueling tankers. Well, the new one was built with this emission stacking scrubber that is so tall, the new oiler cannot get under 70% of the world's bridges. It's bonkers. Why the Navy is following this, I don't know. But now Panama controls it. So that's another reason why, if not retake the canal, but we need to exert more pressure on Panama. So that is number 3, the ship registry, and it ties back. That is part of the reason, I believe. There aren't many books on the invasion of Panama. It was really a secret and forgotten and moved on thing. But I think the ship registry was a big reason why Herbert Walker Bush invaded Panama. Reagan had tried to retake that registry. He had tried to solve some of the problems with the port fees and the Panama Papers, illicit corporations being created there, and failed. And Herbert Walker Bush Sr., invaded Panama to solve these problems. But then what happened was Iraq invaded Kuwait. The United Kingdom, which is a huge maritime power, enormous, came to Bush and said, we have to help Kuwait. A lot of other shipping-centric industries pushed Bush to support Kuwait. We had the Gulf War based off of this, and what that did is we had to pull all our troops from Panama. We had to give up our fixes to the corruption inside Panama in order to send everyone over to the Gulf War, which has led to 30 years of disaster in the Middle East, these Middle East wars. So this is huge, but we're not even at the top 2. All right, we're still at number 3. The number 2 reason why we need to retake the Panama Canal is we talk about the difficulties securing our southern border. Well, one of the reasons Teddy Roosevelt built the Panama Canal is because a canal is a moat. It is very difficult for people to cross from the south. And as millions of people crossed the Darien Gap, they were bussed over the Panama Canal by Panama, by China, by these NGOs. So if you look at Southern Command, so Southern Command is the military organization that's in charge of securing Central and South America. It's a large combatant command of the United States. They had a huge, beautiful headquarters in Panama. I'm going to try to bring up pictures. This was the base. We had an enormous military base inside of Panama. Let me bring up the... I'm in the wrong browser. Sorry, guys. And what we did is we gave up this military base with the deal with Jimmy Carter. So these are the headquarters in Panama. Some beautiful buildings. Well, these buildings have been taken over. Sorry, I didn't add it to stage. These buildings, U.S. Southern Command on the Panama Canal has been taken over or given to NGOs. And these NGOs, non-government organizations, which the United States is paying a large part for, they are the ones responsible for a lot of the migrant crisis. They're the ones purchasing the buses, which the Panamanians are busing people over the Panama Canal. There are only 3 bridges over the Panama Canal. So the migrant problem is a direct result of this Panama Canal issue. And huge support from China. China is purchasing large amounts of property in and around Panama, and the Panamanian government is letting them. And it's so far as they say it's a Panama strategic hub. China has turned Panama into the geographic and commercial concentration center for the strategic hub for political, commercial, and military advance in the Americas. China has not made a secret that it is influencing Panamanian politics and money inside Panama. So this is a huge problem. And China has sent a lot of people over the Panama Canal into the United States. We don't know how many, but there have been a lot. So that's number 2 reason. Number 1 reason, the absolute number 1 reason why we need to consider retaking the Panama Canal is the fleet problem. So the United States Navy ran a series of exercises around the interwar period between World War I and World War II, and we ran more in 2016. And the primary purpose for the Panama Canal is it's very difficult. We have 2 fleets. We have the Pacific Fleet based in San Diego and the Atlantic Fleet based in Norfolk. And if we have a war with China or there's a war in the Atlantic, our destroyers have to pass through the Panama Canal. We will lose a war without this. And it's not just the Navy, but the majority of Army supplies move on ships. The majority of Air Force supplies, bombers, enormous amount of bombs, and they use an enormous amount of fuel. Well, how are we getting those bombs and fuels to forward air bases? We can't shuttle them across like the Berlin Airlift, because the Berlin Airlift was only a short distance from East Germany to West Germany. If we have a war in the Pacific going all the way from the west coast of America to the Philippines or Okinawa or another U.S. base in South Korea, is impossible via air. We need to ship this equipment, and everything on the East Coast has to go through the Panama Canal. Or else those materials, heavy weapons, tanks, munitions, they will have to go across trucks and trains in the United States, which is going to take a lot longer, cost a lot more money, and put a lot of strain on our energy production, particularly if some of those people who cross the Panama Canal sabotage our refineries and our electrical grid. It's going to be a huge problem to move those supplies across America and load them on West Coast ports. And we don't have that many military load ports on the West Coast, so you're going to see massive congestion on the West Coast trying to load military supplies all in one time. So whether we retake, well, first of all, when Trump says we are going to take Panama, he's not talking about all of Panama, right? He's just talking about the Panama Canal Zone, the area right around the canal. But again, there's precedents in my lifetime. But maybe we don't even need to take the entire Panama Canal. We could take just the Southern Command, reestablish Southern Command headquarters in that canal zone, in these buildings that we gave to NGOs, eject the NGOs, which hopefully will not be able to pay rent after Trump and comes in and DOJ clears these guys away. But we absolutely must secure the Panama Canal, because it does not take very much for a sabotage team to destroy it, and that would be huge implications for the U.S. military. Again, the Army and Air Force would have to move everything across the continental United States, which would be expensive and difficult, take a lot of time. And the U.S. Navy would have to send aircraft carriers around South America. And China is not just investing in Panama, they're investing in property around the Drake Passage, which is South America. They're doing military exercises with South Africa. And they're building icebreakers and moving through the Bering Strait between Alaska and Russia. So they've got us cornered in. So we absolutely critical to national security that the Panama Canal is maintained. And we do not lose it if there is a war with China. So it's a lot right there, but those are the top 10 reasons why Trump is not wrong. We do need to play hardball with Panama. We do need to secure the Panama Canal, and we do have to put U.S. economic and national security interests first. The good news to this is not only is this an interest of Trump, but the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, he was just had a show with Ben Shapiro and mentioned ships numerous times. He was the creator of the Ships for America Act. He understands the importance of the maritime domain. And we just got an Assistant Secretary of Defense, Elbridge Colby, in charge of policy, who understands the importance of ships and importance of choke points. So there's a lot more going behind the scenes. On one end, it sounds like a joke, something Trump's just putting on Truth Social. But underneath it is a lot of shenanigans, a lot of nefarious activity, and a lot of things that we need to be paying attention to. And we can't give everything away that American blood and American treasure secured, which the Democrats have been doing for 100 years. We need to put someone very strong in as IMO ambassador under the UN. We need a very strong ambassador to Panama, which, by the way, the Democrats blocked. Eric Bethel, who was just on the Sean Ryan show, he was nominated by Trump to be ambassador of China and to fix some of these problems, but did not pass the nomination process in the Senate. Prior to that, he was confirmed as president of the World Bank. So why he was blocked from Panama tells you everything you need to know about why they don't want the internationalists, the globalists, do not want us focusing on that because a lot of them have their money in these shell companies that the Panama Papers exposed. So those are the top 10 reasons why we need to start playing hardball with Panama.